So I have just watched two low-budget zombie movies in a row that were actually worth my time. After the bullshit of Zombie Abomination and Germ Z a while back, I would say I'm on a roll here. So tonight's movie that I'm going to talk to you about is called Dead and Breakfast, and this is a horror comedy which doesn't take itself seriously at all. So if you're expecting the vein of horror comedy that's just as scary as it is funny, it might not be up your alley, but for my money, I had a fun time watching it. In this movie, there's a group of friends who are on their way to a wedding when they end up getting lost, and they end up stopping at a bed and breakfast for the night to kind of recuperate. And while they're there, some strange things begin happening involving murder, black magic, and the undead. And the worst part is they're going to miss the wedding. So, when it comes to the humor in this film, again, I did have a fun time watching it, but I will say it didn't have me laughing like that often or consistently. For the most part, it was just entertaining and mildly amusing, but, still it's a lot better than it just being cringeworthy and trying too hard to be funny. Most of it just comes from this really goofy dialogue. I would say the funniest scene for me happens pretty early on in the film, and I'm not going to spoil anything of it, but it basically involves physical slapstick humor, and out of everything else in the movie, it got the biggest laugh out of me. As for, the low budget, I can definitely tell that most of the money went to the gore effects in this movie because most of them are pretty damn convincing and cool to look at, and they even get pretty creative in some spots. Like, there's a point where a guy gets his head sliced by a cymbal, and, this isn't like a special effect or a gore scene, but another thing that I thought was pretty creative was later on in the film when the characters start making these homemade shotguns. I thought that was really badass. As for some nitpicks in the film, aside from the fact that it wasn't making me laugh, all the time, I did mention that only most of the gore effects were convincing. The only one that looked pretty fake was this gag involving a severed head. It looked like it was completely made out of rubber. And then there's a point with a chainsaw being embedded in someone, and you can tell that the thing's made of rubber because it just flops around like a dildo. Not that I would know anything about dildo physics. And then there's just a couple of moments where it gets generally sloppy, like with the homemade shotgun, it's essentially the type of thing that would take two people to operate, and there's a point where a person is able to shoot it by themselves, and I was thinking, how the fuck did she do that? And then, there's another scene where this guy is monologuing, and the movie just jump cuts while he's talking for no apparent reason. I will say I do see the necessity of jump cuts at times, like especially when people are vlogging and they, keep fucking up. Personally, when it comes to that, I just do whatever I find easiest for what I'm doing. Like, when I'm doing a regular review like this, most of the time it's just me sitting here, one static shot the whole time. But lately, whenever I've been making list videos, which last a little longer, you have seen me jump cutting in those just because it's hard to go that long without messing up at some point. So I make that easier on myself. But yeah, it was just one shot of a guy talking. Anyway, I'm ranting way too much about that one brief moment in the film. In the end, I would say you don't need to put Dead and Breakfast at the top of your watch list, but if you can find it on Netflix or YouTube or wherever, definitely give it a watch because it does come recommended. And that's really all I have to say about the film. I hope you all have a good one.